Hello, so I'm Karunagita, and I wanted to start by mentioning yesterday in his talk, Vishwapani made the analogy of a map, talking about how quite a lot of order members felt that they lacked a map after ordination. And it just seemed like a nice link, because although the practice Lotus is not a map in the sense of telling you where to go, one of the things that we say in the introduction to it is it can be helpful to think of ourselves as being on a journey that goes through particular and often recognisable terrain. The practice Lotus can be thought of as something of a map of that terrain. So it won't tell us where to go, but it can help us locate where we are as a basis for then giving rise to some sort of creative way of where to go. So my role in the next 15 minutes maximum is to introduce the practice Lotus that we've developed, but I want to also talk about the process of developing it, because I think that's really important, and that process is still ongoing. It's not a complete thing yet. But in order to do that, I also just wanted to, in a way, introduce myself with the hat that I had on for doing this. I've been really appreciating just reading the whole range of the extending out presentations that we've got happening this weekend. I've rather dreaded over the years, going on retreat, that question, well, what do you do, as in for a living? Because it's not a simple one or two word answer. But here it actually is relevant, so I will tell you. I'm the founder and co-founder, co-director of Triangle Consulting Social Enterprise, and most of what we do is create and support a whole range of tools that are applied across health and social care, called the Outcome Stars, which help people to engage and in having a conversation, having a collaborative, meaningful conversation about their lives. They can also help create a common language, help services learn what they're doing well, what they're not. But also, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about them and enjoy about the work is that they're a way of modelling complex change in a way that people can then talk about it and share it, because it's transparent. So I like that. I like the fact that it, in some ways, breaks down the divide between the professional and the person that they're helping. The sort of takes us out of the done to paradigm and more into a done with paradigm. And the other thing I really like about the work is that Amaragita and Taramani have worked with us for a great many years as associates, so it's one element of what they do. And also Kavya Shri, who's here, worked with us for a couple of years. Abhilasha does, as does a wonderful Mitra in the ordination process. So it's closest I've ever got to team-based right livelihood, and I really love that aspect of it. So moving on into this sort of process, I mean, innovation often happens when an idea is taken from one place and applied into another place. And that's what's happened here. In fact, the star itself is based on one of the bits of inspiration for that is a life coaching wheel. So anyone who's done coaching will find it quite a familiar form anyway. But in this case, the idea for the practice Lotus arose as a conversation between Amaragita and Dhammarati. So Dhammarati was talking about the Sikkha project. This is going back nearly 18 months, so it was right in those early stages. And from what I gathered, it was slightly, this is ever so big and this is ever so complex. And Amaragita said, what you need is an outcome star. So that started the whole process. But it's been quite a long process. It's involved quite a lot of people. So that was probably around about May last year. And since then, so Amaragita and I came here and we had a conversation with Dhammarati and Dhammamega just to sort of say, what is it? Could it possibly work? And at that stage I was saying, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's appropriate. And then Amaragita and I tested it out in our chapter. We tested it out with a few people at North London. And we thought, okay, it's got legs. It's at least worth trying to do this. So since then, we had sort of 2 workshops in the autumn last year at the North London Buddhist Centre. So I was very grateful to them for hosting that as well, where we brought together at each of those, it was about 20 different people. Some of them were the same people, some of them were different. And in the first workshop, that included everybody that was here on the order course at Adhisthana last autumn. We also had a workshop here during the November college meeting with any of the college members that wanted to come and hear how it was going and feed into it. And we've also had, then there were some other individuals like Maitreyi, Vasantra, Subhadramati, Tejananda, various other people who we sort of individually consulted. It was also tested out at the Adhisthana Community Days, which is what gave rise to the idea to do it here. We were planning quite a limited sort of pilot of it, but now we've ended up with a rather less limited pilot of it. And we've also had a workshop with some people in terms of introducing it and how to use it, and some of those have gone on to test it out with people. But I just thought what might be interesting is if we could do a show of hands. If I don't have no idea how many people are in this room that were involved in any aspect of this process, but could you put your hands up if you were? Yes, you can just have a look around. Great, thank you. So it's been quite a process, and as I say, it is still in its pilot form. So there is still room to feed into it. But I want to say briefly what it is, and then Amaragita is going to talk about how to use it and what the point is. So basically what you've got here, you've got one part of it. There's another document which we're going to give you on the way out today. But what you've got here is the Lotus itself, which is really quite a straightforward concept. It's 9 different aspects of practice and life arranged in a radial shape. So you'll have seen lots of things arranged in radial shapes in different walks of life. We made this into a lotus because it felt appropriate in this particular context, and also because we found that actually the design and presentation really matters. Although it sounds like quite a basic thing, I think it's quite important. But these 9 areas are derived through all of those workshops, all of that development process of hearing people talk about, well, what aspects do we think about when we think about our practice and about our lives? And in a way, you could cut these lots of different ways, and in those workshops we did. So there's been lots of, well, you could see it that way, you could see it that way, well, let's put those together with that. So there's a lot that happens. So the whole process of developing these tools is around listening to lots and lots of different people describe what change looks like in all sorts of different ways, and then modelling that, feeding it back, seeing how that goes down, changing it again, feeding it back again. That's a whole iterative process of developing various different drafts. My brain has been conditioned to do that for about 15 years now, along with various other brains. Anyway, so we've ended up with these 9 different areas, and all of these are described in some way. Some of them are more obvious than others. So they've got meditation, ethics and skillful action, mindfulness in daily life, loving kindness, all those different areas. And I really like what Parami said when she was introducing it about this being around sort of unifying and getting a language. That's something that has really motivated me around this as well, that it's really important that we have ways to be able to talk to each other, and that needs some sort of shared language. And it also needs all aspects of practice sort of on the table, so to speak. So I'm hoping that does it. And then you've got this sort of scale of 5 points, which is in numbers and colours and words. And so it's not just an open thing about, let's talk about meditation. Where are you on 1 to 5? Or what, it's each different aspect of each one of those areas is described. It's described, and that's what we're going to be handing out to you at the end, is the descriptors of all of those different areas. It's described based on a fairly loose underlying model of change, which was also derived through this whole development process, which is what you see in the colours and numbers in the top right-hand corner of the Lotus chart that you've got in front of you. And one of the things to say is that this goes very much from, it's not just about the order, it's about, this is to be used in centres and we wouldn't imagine it being used with beginners, here, walk through the centre, where are you? It's, but really once somebody starts to engage, they might be thinking of becoming a mitra, for example, or engaging in whatever way is meaningful for them. So what you've got in those stages, it starts off with seeking. So that's when somebody obviously they're looking for something, they know they're looking for something, they're there, they're actively engaged, but they haven't yet found what works for them. So with meditation, you might be trying it sometimes, then it drops away, not quite found what works for you. And then moving into finding, which is where you do find, okay, this context works, this way of meditating works, at least for now, it's all, this works. And sometimes that can be quite a nice stage. It's like, oh, good, I remember that very well. I found something to add to my life to make my life better, good. But then you get to what we've termed it engaging and revealing. There's lots of different words we experimented with. But in some ways, that's sort of like where practice starts to bite. So I remember getting to a stage where I couldn't fit Buddhism and meditation into my life because it was, so I had to actually start to change things in order to be able to practice effectively. So that's that, and that can be quite an uncomfortable process or not, it can be very creative as well. And then you get to this stage of working well. Okay, this is going well, in whatever way. And that can be for all sorts of different reasons, depending on the area of your life you're looking at. But it's also one of the things I think that's interesting, and it links maybe to what Vishwapani was saying a bit yesterday as well, is that it is possible to plateau. You can get to, okay, this is all comfortable, this is fine, boomf. And this moves beyond that to a stage of unfolding, how that is described will depend on the different areas as well. So you've got those 5 different stages, you've got 9 different areas, which makes 45 descriptors, all of which, and it's described, all of those are basically detailed. And I think it's really interesting because although, we're doing this, looking at it in an order context, and a lot of things will be working well, we all have sort of trailing edges and leading edges. So you can still find that you may be, you can be all sorts of places on this particular at any particular stage. So just a couple more things to say before I hand over to Amaragita. One is that it's got triangle on the top of it. One of the things that I struggled with early on when we were sort of engaging with the idea is that it's 15 years of learning that's happened within triangle, and I didn't feel that was mine. Well, it isn't mine to gift. So I was really grateful to Joy McKeith, who is my co-founder and co-author of The Outcome Stars. She was just really interested. She's been on some Triratna, Buddha field things. She knows a lot of Triratna people. She's on a spiritual path herself. So she was just fascinated. So she was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did it. And she was very involved in the whole process, which was also fantastic because she was a bit like an outside but that doesn't make sense. We can go into jargon, can't we? And she'd be like, what do you mean by that? So that was good. But also because of that, what I would say is that although this is a gift, it's also a licensed thing. And it's treated a bit like a book. When you read a book, you might not think, oh, that's how I would say it. You might be things you wouldn't express that way. You'd cut it a bit differently. That's fine. But just don't change it. That's all I'd ask. But also at this stage, because it's pilot, feel free to feed those things in. You shouldn't cut it that way, you should cut it that way. That'd be great, because we will review all the feedback and do it properly at the end of this year. So finally, just to say, what I would really encourage is to give it a go. What you will find is that there'll be a whole range of different responses to this in this room for all sorts of reasons. And some of it may also be, quite conditioned things that come up from, school. Oh, it's got numbers on, it's got a scale, I don't like that. There might be all sorts of things that come up. That's fine. There may even be people who want to run screaming from it, in which case feel free. You can do that. But for most people, I would say just give it a go. It's a conversation. Give it a go in conversation. It's not to sort of sit down and do on your own. It's about inspiring a conversation. So I would really encourage you, and even in a way, if you give it a go here and don't really like it or it's not for you, it may well be something that actually is very supportive to some of the people you support. I've done some of these, and I know other people in the room have, and found it really, people have found it really, really helpful as a way to visualise and encapsulate how things are going. So I'm going to hand over to Amaragita to say about how to use it. Thank you.